Hey guys, welcome back. Today is the day. This is AMD's RX 9070. Today AMD is also launching another card. So in total there are two cards available, the RX 9070 and the RX 9070 XT. What I have here is the RX 9070 from Sapphire, and this is the pure model version of it. The pure series is basically an all-white version for Sapphire's Radeon cards. We're not going to waste time about the architecture and the technologies of the card because I've already done that, and I have the link for that video in the description below. But before we move ahead, here is a presentation or a slideshow about the card's specifications. The AMD Radeon RX 9070. It has 56 AMD RDNA 4 compute units, 56 ray tracing accelerators, 112 AI accelerators. It has a peak AI tops of 1165. It has a boost clock of 2.52 GHz. And it comes with 16 gigabytes worth of memory on board. It has a total board power rating of 220 watts. So for this new GPU from AMD, there are a couple of manufacturing AIB partners, of which you have Acer, Asus, PowerColor, Sapphire, XFX, ASRock, Westerarmer, and Yeston. So you'll be seeing the market being flooded with cards from all of these manufacturers. AMD has promised a continuous supply with no shortages for this round. So before we move on to the technical part of everything, whereby I'm going to show you all statistics of how the card performs in a couple of tests and benchmarks, enjoy the B-rolls. As soon as the B-rolls are over, we're going to look at our first set of slides. So for our first test, we've ran the Adobe Photoshop benchmarking test. You can see that the RX 9070 actually performs absolutely best when you take into account its price factor. It performs better than the 5070 Ti, it performs better than the 4070 Ti Super, it performs even better than the 7800 XT and the 7900 GRE. Moving on, we have the Adobe Premiere Pro test. The Adobe Premiere Pro test puts the RX 9070 comfortably in 4th place. It's only superseded by the RTX 5090, RTX 5080 and the RTX 4070 Ti Super. The RX 7900 XTX and the RX 9070 has a very close margin. In another benchmarking test that is really GPU intensive is the DaVinci Resolve test. When you look at DaVinci Resolve, the RX 9070 comes in at 3rd place. It is superseded by the RTX 5090 and the RTX 5080. The RTX 5070 Ti, the 4070 Ti Super, the 7900 XTX, 7800 XT, 7900 GRE are all lagging way behind the RX 9070. So you've seen those benchmarkings when it comes to a creator setup. What I mean by creator setup is a creator is basically somebody whose job revolves around those 3 applications mostly. I am one of those people. And me being a content creator, I am mind blown by the mere performance of this card. There's never been an instance where $550 card is overshadowing $750 cards, $900 cards, $800 cards. So for this bad boy, I tell you, the 9070 to me is the best thing AMD has released ever since their X3D processors. I'm really impressed AMD. So looking at those charts, it's fair enough to say that the 9070 should be there when you're actually looking to build a hybrid workstation. We haven't touched about gaming performances yet, but for those work-related tasks, hats off guys, great job. So the previous bunch of slides were for work-related tasks. Now let's move off to gaming benchmarks. And a quick heads up guys, This card is really outperforming a lot of other cards out there. So let's move to our first slide. The first slide we're going to take a look at is 3 games that I've actually played. Yeah, I've not actually benchmarked a lot of games, but I just chose 4 titles which I think would be really useful for majority of users out there. So the first game we're going to look at is World War Z. So in World War Z, I actually ran this card on its native settings without any upscaling, without any technologies involved from the graphics card. Average FPS we recorded was 151. Its max was 211 with a minimum FPS rating of 84. So once I enable Hyper RX, the FPS level scales drastically. It's almost 2 times the amount that we get from the native score. Average FPS of 254, a max of 338, and a minimum of 203. Next up is Marvel Rivals. Marvel Rivals, I ran it with Lumen graphics quality. On its native settings, I managed an average of 52 and a minimum of 46 FPS. The moment I enable FSR in-game and also turned on Hyper RX, I managed to get an average FPS score of 108 and a minimum FPS score of 82. Bear in mind that all these games are tested under the resolution of 4K. I ran it with the AMD Ryzen 7 9800X3D and 48GB worth of RAM from Kingston. And then, looking at Monster Hunter Wild, under the Ultra Graphics quality settings, with ray tracing, FSR and no frame generation involved, we managed an FPS rating of 57.23, with the scores at 19,504 points. On the second test, I actually ran it with ray tracing, FSR and Hyper RX, which immediately bumped up our average FPS score of 57.23 all the way up to 89.14. However, this resulted in lesser point scoring, and in this benchmark, from getting excellent quality, I managed to get good. So these are the 3D Mark testing reports. We ran Port Royal, Speedway, Steel Nomad DirectX 12 and Steel Nomad Vulcan. So these 4 tests actually show you how the graphic cards rank up in terms of its utilization and performance. These are all synthetic benchmarks. Another thing to actually take note here is that, yes, you see the scores are all in a scoring format. You've got 5 digits, you've got 4 digits to it. But those digits do not really mean 100 FPS, nor do they actually mean it's 10 FPS. The region, the area around it is gray. So I hope you guys take this with a pinch of salt. So the next game we're going to look at is Black Myth Wukong. This whole thing was simulated in 4K with the same processor and same RAM. For this game, I actually ran 2 separate tests, one under the very high graphics quality and another using cinematic graphics quality. Under very high, you can see that when ray tracing and FSR is enabled, we managed a score of 42, max of 58, a minimum of 30, and it uses 8.2 gigabytes of VRAM. With ray tracing, FSR and frame generation enabled within in-game, we scored an average of 64, a max of 64, a minimum of 23, and a utilization of 9.3 gigabytes of VRAM. Things took a drastic change when I enabled ray tracing and Hyper RX. With these settings, we managed an average FPS score of 74, a max of 103, a minimum of 58, and a utilization of 10.6 gigabytes of VRAM. Moving off to the cinematics graphic quality preset. Ray tracing and FSR, you score 20, 29 and 15, utilization of 11.5. Ray tracing, FSR and frame generation enabled in-game, you get 36, 50, 29 and utilization of 11.8. With ray tracing and Hyper RX enabled, cinematic settings at 4K, we managed an average FPS score of 69, a max of 100, a minimum of 54, and a utilization of 13.1 gigabytes of VRAM. So guys, you saw the gaming statistics, but what I'm going to talk about here is mainly related to the title of Black Myth Wukong. So you see, that game is extremely GPU intensive. From all those data given, I ran it in two settings, very high and cinematic. In most instances, we tend to play using high graphics. But for the sake of just benchmarking this GPU and seeing how it performs, I decided to run cinematic quality. What impresses me is that under cinematic quality, without any of the in-game or the in-driver technologies enabled, the game is barely playable. But the moment you enable this beauty of a technology that AMD has made for this lineup, which is called Hyper RX, it has been there previously, but it's taken to a whole different level now. Okay, you've got in-driver frame generation, you've got in-driver anti-lag, a whole load of other features. You can check that out in the previous video. The game, from being unplayable at 4K resolution, becomes extremely smooth. When you talk about latency, in all honesty, I'm just a casual gamer. I'm not a professional gamer. So for being a casual gamer myself, I didn't face any instances of input lag. I didn't face artifacting. Of course, I'm not going to be pausing the game and micro-analyzing every frame to look for artifacts. That's not me. And for somebody who is going to be spending $550 to $600 on a graphic card, if you're going to do that, I think you should not be doing that, in all honesty. If you're spending $1,000, $2,000, yes, by all means, go ahead and micro-analyze. But you buy this card, or any other card in that price category, you just want something to be comfortable with. You are not going out there to get flagship specifications, top of the line technology and everything. You just want something that works for you, that isn't a rip-off in today's market. So for me, the performance I got is truly one of the best I've had in many, many years. So in all honesty, I think this card performs exceptionally well for a creator and also for a casual gamer. If you're a professional gamer, you want the best, the highest number of FPS and the best graphic settings possible with the lowest amount of input lag and latency and all that, then this card is not for you. You should just probably be thinking about the 5090 then. If you're somebody like me, this is more than enough, guys. So I've told you all about the pricing, $550, $600 for the XT version, $550 for this vanilla version. How would I put it out there is that you can say that there is a difference of 50 USD from the MSRP prices. But as far as we know, there isn't a reference card available. So because there is no reference card available, that MSRP will not be viable in the market today. AIB manufacturers are going to be pricing their cards according to what they perceive the value as. I already have the pricing for Sapphire. Sapphire's pricing for the Pulse version of this 9070 vanilla is about RM 3100 something. The Nitro Plus is about RM 3300 if I recall correctly. The 9070 is roughly about 350 ringgit more than the vanilla version. I will be showing you all the pricing in a bit, okay? You can look at it and analyze. For Malaysians out there, you can opt for the Sapphire cards, or you can opt for XFX, Power Color, S-Rock, or even Acer, because these brands are also in the market already. However, we do not have their retail pricing yet. So guys, do let me know what you all think of the performance from this underrated champion, I feel. This underrated champion from AMD deserves a shout out. And to the guys at AMD, thank you for not messing up this one.